This video contains content that may be confronting.
The Israeli military has announced that it is beginning aid drops into Gaza, and they will establish humanitarian corridors to allow United Nations convoys to take food into the Strip.
That's as health authorities in Gaza report at least 123 people have died of starvation and malnutrition. Middle East correspondent Matthew Doran reports from Jerusalem.
The Israeli military made this announcement late on Saturday night local time on the directive of the Netanyahu government, and it appears that it has come into force almost immediately, with reports coming from northern Gaza at least of these airdrops already beginning. These airdrops are involving pallets laden with supplies such as flour, sugar and canned food for the local population there. But the announcement also goes further. It says that the IDF will start to establish so-called humanitarian corridors in Gaza, areas where it will be safe for the United Nations and other aid agencies to operate convoys in and out to collect supplies of aid from where they are dropped off at the Gaza border, just inside the Gaza border, and then distribute them throughout the Strip. This is something which has been a key criticism from the UN and humanitarian agencies in recent weeks and in recent months, that it is simply too difficult and too dangerous to pick up the supplies which are making it across the border into Gaza, while Israel continues to say that there is a responsibility here for those humanitarian agencies to distribute that aid, saying that this crisis which is being experienced across Gaza is partly the UN and humanitarian agencies' fault. We have also heard from the IDF that it will start to enact what are being described as humanitarian pauses in densely populated parts of Gaza to try to break down what that actually means. It's most likely going to relate to the bombardment of Gaza, which we have seen relentlessly continuing in recent weeks and recent months, but focusing on some of those very densely packed areas. We're pressing pause on that, and the IDF taking a bit more time to consider whether or not it is appropriate to launch those strikes. I don't think we necessarily can say that those strikes are going to be easing as such, but we'll wait to see how that plays out over the coming days. Now, despite announcing this situation and also saying it will reconnect the power supply to one of Gaza's desalination plants, a supply which was cut back in March as Israel tried to apply pressure to Hamas to release the remaining Israeli hostages there. Despite this announcement, Israel is still insisting that there is no starvation crisis in Gaza, that the current situation is of the creation of Hamas. But as we have mentioning, it has changed course here. So clearly there has been a calculation within the Israeli government that in the face of this significant and sustained international criticism, which has ramped up particularly in the last week or so, that it does have to act here. We will of course have to monitor how this plays out in the next short while to see if it makes any sort of tangible difference, considering starvation has taken hold right across the Strip. Palestinian health authorities saying that in the last few weeks 123 people have died as a result of starvation and malnutrition, and we continue to see devastating scenes coming from hospitals across the Strip of starving babies and other Palestinians battling to survive there. In the last week, more than 100 humanitarian agencies have sounded the alarm of mass starvation taking hold across Gaza. We know that Australia joined more than 24 other countries condemning Israel for the humanitarian crisis which had developed, and also calling for an immediate end to the war, for at least a ceasefire and hostage deal to be agreed to between Israel and Hamas. And the World Health Organization, when looking at that humanitarian crisis, has said that this is man-made starvation. Now, Israel continues to say that it is allowing enough aid to go in, that there have been hundreds of truckloads sitting at the border, effectively rotting, while UN agencies have not been picking them up. But many humanitarians say that that figure, the number of trucks coming across the border, 250 of them last week, that needs to be much higher if it's to make any difference across Gaza at the moment. This announcement on a Saturday night local time also follows thousands of people taking to the streets of Tel Aviv, again protesting against the Netanyahu government, demanding that the Prime Minister agree to a ceasefire and hostage deal. The bulk of their concerns are about those 50 remaining hostages still held captive in Gaza, 20 of whom are still believed to be alive. And they marched on the US consulate in Tel Aviv, demanding that the US President Donald Trump intervene there. Now, in saying that the primary concern for that group are the hostages, that does not dismiss that some of these groups, and it does appear to be a growing number within these groups, are also concerned about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. They are deeply concerned about the actions of their government and of their military in trying to target claimed Hamas fighters and facilities right across the Strip, something Israel says will continue even though there has been this shift in official policy with regards to some aid deliveries.